You figured out why you do the thing. You traced it back, you understood the pattern, named the wound, saw the behavior clearly for what it was, and then you did it again anyway. That moment, right there, is one of the strangest and most disorienting experiences in any kind of inner work. Because you were supposed to be past this. You were supposed to have grown out of it. And instead, there you are, watching yourself from the inside, fully aware, and somehow still unable to stop. If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. I'm someone who spends a lot of time thinking about the mind, the nervous system, and the quieter mechanics behind human behavior. And one of the questions I come back to most often is this one. Why does insight feel like such a turning point, and yet so rarely work like one? Because that gap between understanding yourself and actually changing can feel like its own kind of failure. Like you're broken in a specific way that even awareness can't reach. And I want to offer a different way of seeing that. One that might actually make the process feel less like you're losing and more like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Most people enter self-awareness work with a quiet assumption that once they understand why they do something, the doing of it will naturally start to fade. That clarity is the solution. That if you can just see the pattern clearly enough, it will lose its grip. And that assumption makes sense. In a lot of areas of life, understanding something does solve it. If you understand why your car makes a certain noise, you can fix it. If you understand why a recipe keeps failing, you can adjust it. The logic transfers cleanly from the outer world, but the inner world doesn't work that way. And most people don't realize this until they've already felt the sting of it. Here's what's actually happening. Your conscious mind, the part that can reflect, reason, name things, track patterns, and have realizations, is only one part of the system. Beneath it, your nervous system and your deeper behavioral wiring operate on an entirely different level, one that was shaped long before you had language for any of it. Think of it this way. Imagine a city that's been using the same road system for 40 years. Traffic patterns have developed, habits have formed, the roads have worn down in specific places. And then someone draws a new map, a better map, one that shows more efficient routes, clearer paths, less congestion. The map doesn't move the roads, it just shows you what's there. Insight is the map. It's real and it matters. But the roads, your nervous system, your conditioned responses, your deeply embedded sense of who you are, those don't rearrange just because you've seen them clearly. There's a reason this particular frustration feels so personal, and it has to do with how we've been taught to think about growth. We're often raised with a story that goes something like this. Awareness leads to understanding. Understanding leads to change. And change means the old thing is gone. So when the old thing persists after awareness, it feels like proof that something is wrong with us specifically, that we're unusually stuck, that we know better and still can't do better, which must mean we're weak or broken or somehow beyond help. Your nervous system is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was built to do, which is protect consistency. The brain's primary job is not growth, it's survival. And it defines survival, in large part, as staying close to what is familiar. That pattern you keep returning to, even when you can see it clearly, is familiar. Your system has run that route thousands of times. It knows exactly what to expect. Even if what's at the end of that route isn't good for you, your nervous system treats the familiarity itself as a form of safety. Seeing the pattern doesn't make it unfamiliar, it just makes it visible. There's something worth sitting with here, and it's this. Insight and integration are two different processes. Insight is cognitive. It happens in language, in reflection, in the mind's ability to step back and observe. Integration is something slower, something that happens in the body, in repeated experience, in the gradual rewiring of what feels normal. You can have the insight in a single afternoon. Integration can take months, sometimes longer. And in between those two things, there is a stretch of time where you see yourself clearly and still feel somewhat powerless to change what you see. That stretch is not failure. That stretch is the actual work. If you've ever noticed that you understand something logically but still feel stuck in the same pattern, that's actually a very common experience. I made a longer video where I break down why insight alone doesn't always lead to change and what it looks like to work with your subconscious rather than against it. I'll link that below if you want to explore that more deeply. There's also something that happens specifically to people who are highly self-aware that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's this. Awareness can become its own form of pressure. When you can see yourself clearly, you start holding yourself to a higher standard. You feel like you've lost the excuse of not knowing. And so each time the pattern repeats, it carries an extra layer of judgment. You knew, and you still did it. And that judgment, that additional weight, can actually make the process harder, not easier, because judgment activates the nervous system's threat response. And a nervous system in a threat state is not a nervous system that's available for growth. It's contracting, protecting, circling back to what's familiar, the very thing you're trying to change. This is one of the quieter ironies of self-awareness. The more you can see, the more you expect of yourself. And the more you expect of yourself without meeting those expectations, the more unsafe the process of growth starts to feel. What actually creates the conditions for change is not heightened self-criticism. It's something closer to steady, patient observation. Seeing yourself clearly without that seeing becoming another form of pressure. So what does that look like practically? It starts with a shift in what you're measuring. If you're measuring growth by whether the pattern has stopped, you will almost always feel behind. Patterns don't stop suddenly. They lose frequency. They lose intensity. They start to feel less automatic, less urgent, less defining. The question worth asking is not, am I still doing this? The question is, how do I relate to it now compared to how I related to it a year ago? Because the relationship to the pattern changes before the pattern itself does. That shift in relationship, that moment where you can feel yourself about to move toward the old behavior and there's a small pause, a breath of awareness before the automatic response kicks in, that is growth, even if what follows looks the same from the outside. You are not failing at your own awareness. You are learning what awareness can and cannot do on its own. And that learning, strange and slow and sometimes disorienting as it is one of the most honest parts of this process. If any of this landed for you, take a breath. Not because everything is resolved, but because you just spent a few minutes looking honestly at something that most people spend enormous energy avoiding. That willingness to stay with the discomfort of knowing and still not fully changing, without abandoning the process entirely, that is not a small thing. Growth at this level is not a line moving steadily upward. It's something quieter, more textured, and a lot more patient than we're usually encouraged to be with ourselves. If you want to keep exploring this kind of work, subscribing means you'll have access to new videos as they come out, all of them aimed at helping you understand your own mind with a little more clarity and a little less self-blame. And if the idea of insight not being enough to create change is something you're sitting with, the video I mentioned earlier goes into that territory more directly. I'll leave it linked below. You're not behind, you're in it. And being in it honestly is the only way through.